Welcome to a special collaborative episode of Victim Justice Unveiled. I'm your host, Tamara Mussolino, and today we're stepping into a critical conversation at the intersection of technology, trauma, and justice. We're joined by Daniel Morrison, founder of Morevolved, a movement for ethical AI and digital dignity. Together, we're unpacking how artificial intelligence is being weaponized in stalking and coercive control, and what it means for survivors, families, and the system meant to protect them. This episode explores how AI tools, from facial recognition to predictive analytics, are being misused by stalkers, the legal and ethical blind spots in tech development, survivor-centered strategies for digital safety, accountability, and reform. This isn't just a conversation about harm, it's about resilience, resistance, and reimagining safety in a digital age. Whether you're a survivor, advocate, technologist, or policymaker, this episode is for you.
Do you mind introducing yourself for our listeners and what you do and maybe a little bit about what we might be talking about today?
Sure. I'm Tamara Mussolino. I am a retired victim advocate supervisor. I was a paralegal during that time as well. My career started in 2006 as a paralegal, working in San Joaquin County, then moving up here to Placer County and finishing out my career here. After retiring, I decided I wasn't done advocating. So now I'm going a new route, and I'm a podcast host as well, and created a platform called Victim Justice Unveiled, where I'm sharing the information I've gained over the almost 20 years of advocacy work, sharing the knowledge with the community and with other survivors, and how to navigate the behind the scenes of the criminal justice world.
What do you advocate for?
So the advocacy is to empower victims throughout the criminal justice process. It's typically centered around the criminal, not the victim. And so empowering victims on where they can seek their power, but also unveiling justice and what that truly looks like, whether it's through legislation reform, whether it's through empowering victims in grassroots advocacy, things like that, helping them navigate that process.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. Well, my name's Dan. I think we met a couple times before. CEO and founder of Morevolved, and I am a AI and cybersecurity expert. Well, as much of an expert as we can be, as it changes by the second nowadays. And I'm really looking forward to having this talk about cybersecurity and cyberspace and those types of things, and what you do as an advocate to really help these folks that need help in that particular space. So really happy to have you, and I'm excited to see where this conversation goes. So we'll go ahead and kick off with our first couple of questions here. How do you coach survivors who still want to use social media to reduce stalking risk?
Related to stalking, one of the things that you want to ensure with victims is their safety. And I think this is sometimes overlooked.
What do you mean by safety?
Safety meaning when a relationship is in a volatile point, so that could include domestic violence, it could be stalking where someone, has ended a relationship and they no longer want to participate in that relationship, or it could be a perpetrator or a intimate partner tracking someone through social media or other devices. Victims in those relationships are in danger. And the highest point of danger is when they decide to separate themselves from that individual. That's oftentimes when we see the escalation happen. And so it's very important to create safety measures for victims throughout that process. So educating them on safety, meaning creating a safety plan. So if they're still with that partner, it's probably not a great idea it's probably not in their best interest to let that individual know that they're aware of the stalking that's going on, but rather document the stalking. If they're texting you messages, or if you're thinking that they're using your social media or your apps to track you, go to law enforcement, document that information, and report it. Law enforcement may have other suggestions on how to navigate that. But it's very important that you don't want to create a space where that victim is victimized by alerting the individual that they're aware of.
What about things like data integrity and those types of things when you're going to law enforcement? I know there's a lot of folks out there, and we do a lot of training in cybersecurity, and we teach people how to, be safe online. Turn on your privacy settings, those types of things. When it comes to being stalked, and you don't want it to alert the stalker necessarily, is it prudent to go and enforce some of those privacy settings, or just kind of leave them be so law enforcement can do their jobs?
And I think it depends on the situation. Every situation is going to look a little differently, but I do think that overall, if they're still in that relationship, it's important. If that individual doesn't know that they're aware of the stalking that's happening, it could trigger an escalation by shutting those apps down and that information down. So there are other ways that you can communicate with individuals and still stay safe while allowing law enforcement to do their job and gather the evidence they need to put a case together. So using a friend's phone, using someone else's device instead of your device, but still using your device consistently enough to where they see that there's some movement and some activity in that device.
Maybe it'd be helpful to walk through what a cyber stalking case looks like from the law enforcement perspective. There's a lot of folks out there that are under the assumption in a lot of different ways that law enforcement is incapable of doing things, especially when it comes to cyber stalking, and they just don't know what their resources are. We're talking about, not turning off or not turning on your privacy settings, using other people's phones so they can gather evidence or intelligence, depending on your perspective on this. What could law enforcement do when it comes to cyber stalking, particularly on social media?
That's a good question. And law enforcement, I think it's important to know that in order to build a criminal case, law enforcement has to be able to document that a crime is occurring. And the only way they can do that is with building a case through the evidence presented. So if you're a victim and you believe you're being stalked, going to law enforcement, my mind's thinking back at a case where you don't necessarily want to go to law enforcement, because if you're being stalked and you're traveling to the agency, you could be alerting the perpetrator at that point that you're going to law enforcement. So there are ways where you can make online reports. Again, maybe using a friend's phone instead of your own phone in making those reports, just to provide that extra layer of safety. So once law enforcement has that information, they can follow through and identifying potential sources of that stalking.
Well, that makes gives people an option to go and do different things to actually make sure that they're safe. So let's kind of shift gears on the law enforcement side for just a minute before we go into some of the other questions. So you're a victim advocate, and not being able to go to law enforcement necessarily, or having to go through, a friend's phone. Maybe it's not somebody that they're willing to share all of the different things that have been happening, the reason why they're there. As a victim advocate, what would you recommend for somebody that's going through this? All right, what kind of help can they seek that's maybe not law enforcement to get through this? Or maybe it's after they've been stalked.
I think the most important thing as an advocate is you have to meet the victim where they are. I may have my own personal views of what I think I would do in that situation, but I'm not in that situation. And so I can't answer for someone else and what that would look like. But for victims going through that situation that are in the middle of being stalked or have just decided to leave that unhealthy relationship that they know they can no longer be safe in, there are resources. There are shelters, there's housing, there are programs out there to help protect them. You can check with your local domestic violence shelters. They have housing options for you. You can create, if you do move to a new location, you can register with the Secretary of State, which has a program for rerouting mail called Safe at Home. It's the Safe at Home program. So there are things like that that victims can do, but probably one of the biggest tools a victim could use if they decided to leave, and this also would help law enforcement, is to get a protective order. And that one establishes clear boundaries between the victim and the perpetrator, letting the perpetrator know enough's enough, and you've crossed the boundaries, and I don't want you to cross these boundaries any longer. And if that perpetrator does cross those boundaries, then the victim can contact law enforcement with the evidence and let them know that the perpetrator has crossed the boundaries. So an example of that could be text messages from the individual saying, who knows what, stalking them through social media or texting them or threatening them, screenshotting those, giving those to law enforcement and letting law enforcement follow up on those leads. It's really important to maintain evidence throughout the entire criminal process, criminal proceedings, because that's how the courts are able to seek justice on behalf of the victim.
So going back to, I had no idea that from a cyber stalking perspective that there were that many resources available. And it's actually fascinating because we haven't really talked about it yet. There are different forms of cyber stalking. We've talked about social media. We've brought up, digital text messages, those types of things, and those lead into physical stalking, which is where obviously law enforcement probably gets more involved even than on the cyber side. So it's just fascinating to me to hear that there are resources out there that lead into different things. What percentage of cyber stalking lead into physical stalking of individuals?
I don't have an answer on that.
I'm curious to find that out someday.
That would be very interesting to find out. But I think there's one important note on stalking, is that Marcy's rights actually, it's a part of California's Constitution and a part of many other states. It's called Marcy's Law, or Marcy's Rights, as we call it in California. It actually was created after Marcy was murdered by her stalking boyfriend. Her family went ahead and created this platform of rights for victims, which ultimately became a part of California's Constitution. So it is something that in many states, and California specifically, is recognized. And I think it's just really important, and I can't encourage victims enough, is to document and report, and don't give up. I think for victims, I've worked with a lot of victims that get frustrated with law enforcement because they don't feel like they're being heard. They don't feel like they're getting the information documented.
So I want to change tracks a little bit before we get into like social media safety and those types of things. In my world, in the cybersecurity world, people reach out to me for a lot of different reasons. And sometimes we refer to law enforcement, sometimes we don't, just kind of depends on the situation. Usually, by the time I get a call as a cybersecurity expert, we have gone down a path that is not very good. So I want to talk a little bit about exploitation, just in general, because I think it's an important topic that people are not aware of, that we should probably raise more awareness to. So one of the things that I've been called on is exploitation of a child, exploitation of, these by different groups, specifically hackers. Like we talk a lot about cyber stalking. We talk a lot about the folks that know people that are out there. maybe it's an ex-boyfriend, girlfriend, those types of things that are out there. But there are groups of people out there that are specifically targeting young people because of their social media status. And these young people that are on social media, they may not want to report any of this stuff because they're afraid. They're afraid of telling their parents. They're afraid of telling their friends. They're being extorted because they've, in the world of AI, people can get, they can just make stuff up about them at any given point with a single photo. So from that perspective, and we start talking about exploitation, we start talking about a unknown version of cyber stalking. Do you have any kind of recommendations for the folks that would listen to this, or maybe even the parents that are listening to this, where their kids are on social media, where this might be happening, looking at behaviors, those types of things? Do you have any recommendations of what to look for friends, family, those types of things that might be being stalked or exploited or something like that, so we can go out and ask the question, do you need help?
I think having conversations with your children and having an open relationship with them to where they feel comfortable. But even then, I think oftentimes children still don't share everything, right? They're never going to share everything with their adult counterparts.
Well, let's look at it from a victim perspective. Let's, I guess, put the child as the victim, and so are the parents in a lot of different ways. Because the parents don't want anything to happen to their child. And the child obviously doesn't want to go through any of this stuff. And this goes for friendships. I mean, and elderly too. We're talking about children, but the elderly are another vulnerable segment of the population that are very, very vulnerable to exploit. It happens all the time. So maybe look at it from a victim perspective.
Yeah, and I think that helps, and that makes sense. In that, from a victim's perspective, the stalker or the hacker or the perpetrator of the crime, it all reverts back to power and control. Mm-hmm. And so as long as it's held in secret, they have the power. So allowing that information to come out, it's important to encourage those victims to allow that information to come out to a trusted individual, so that they can help them navigate that situation better.
Have you seen in your experience where people, and I don't know, it's going to be different for everybody that's out there, where people may exhibit, I don't want to say a symptom, but a sign, symptom, something like that maybe a loved one could key in on, that they're being extorted or something like that? Have you seen anything like that?
Absolutely. Any change in pattern is a sign that something is not right. I think oftentimes we chalk things up to, oh, you're just a teenager, or, they're just going through something right now, or they had a hard day in school. But really look at their behavior and sit down with them and spend some time with them. Kids want to open up, I think. But I think there's that fear of being judged or fear of disappointment.
I think the fear of being judged is definitely a fear for most parents, and it's not just and it's kind of funny, right? Because it goes back full circle. There's a fear of being judged on social media about what happens on social media to their children. There's a fear of being judged by other parents. There's a fear of being judged, even from the system, right? We're talking about the justice system just in general. We're charged as parents to protect our children. Just looking at it from not just caring and loving, where does the parent become liable? And a lot of people don't understand where their own liabilities lie. So they may not do anything because they're like, oh, I don't want to get in trouble by the law because I didn't protect my kid, which is a very real fear for folks that are out there. So you're absolutely right when it comes down to a parent that can. That is having to undergo this with their child. They don't know what to do, and once again, they may not know who to turn to as well. And that goes the same for the elderly that are out there. The folks in the 20s to 60s kind of frame. we have enough resources and things like that. We can call a friend, we can go through and do that. We're not necessarily succumb to peer pressure like a teenager, or oftentimes alone like an elderly person with no one to go back onto. So you're absolutely right. Like I think that's important for people to realize. But we also need people to realize that that is a normal feeling, and you have to work past it. You have to work past it for the people that you love, the people that you care about, and help them get the help that they need. Like the different resources that you were talking about that's out there.
Absolutely.
So it's a really, really great point that it's important for them to be able to do that. And we talked about different resources as well. We talked about law enforcement as a resource. We've talked about little signs that you can look at that are in there. We've got some different cases or different things that I've worked with where people have come in and actually said, "Hey, my child's being extorted for this, and they want us to pay money," and the kids are paying money on these types of things. They're Venmoing whatever they have to be able to not do this, and then come to find out it goes down to, and most people don't even realize this. They always think it's like some kid or something else that's happening out there, but it's really it could be a gang from a foreign adversary that's doing this, that's out there. And people need to be aware of that, because they feel like they're powerless in certain aspects, but to them, you're just a number. The stalking side is a little different, because there's probably and I'm not a psychologist by any means, so, but there's probably a reason, like we were talking about in the beginning of the thing, there's probably a reason that they're stalking them. The gangs that are out there that are doing this type of stalking, they're relentless. They do not care. Generating awareness is a big deal. And the world of AI, like we can get into talk about that here in a couple of minutes, but the world of AI is going to drastically change some of that. So a very good point on what you're talking about with that. From that perspective, going back into kind of like the victim side of it, when somebody undergoes some of this stuff, what kind of, and I know neither one of us are psychologists, but you've seen a lot of trauma as a result of these types of things. What kind of trauma do some of these victims of cyber stalking, those types of things undergo that we as caregivers and friends of the folks that are undergoing this type of stuff should be aware of?
It's a great question. And it's something that's very common, especially this day and age, right? With AI and the increase in the stalking. Important to know that, again, it's not the victim's fault. And so as soon as a victim understands that, the better off they're going to be. But in the initial onset of becoming a victim, there's a lot of emotions that come up, whether it's, again, talking about feeling responsible that you did something wrong to allow this to happen to you, but understanding that that's nothing is your fault. You should be able to be a teenager and have social media and use social media and connect with people on that. But if you notice that your family member, your loved one, your child is not acting right, maybe they're withdrawn, maybe they used to go out and participate in school events, and all of a sudden they're not. They used to go out and hang out with their friends, and all of a sudden they're not. They're home more frequently, or they're asleep more often than they used to be. Those are all signs that you should look into things a little bit deeper and find out if there's something going on.
I know there's everyone's different when it comes to that, and I keep disclaiming that too, because you brought it up earlier. And but is there like a question that we could possibly ask? Obviously, you can't walk into a teenager's room and ask them what's wrong. All right, that's not going to go well on any other on any level whatsoever. But what kind of probing questions might be useful when it comes to that? And then we'll just kind of shift into
No, that's a great question,
stuff.
Actually. Yes, there are great questions you can ask. So you're right. You ask your child, "Hey, how was your day?" What's the answer going to be?
Fine.
Are you going to get a follow-up? You're going to have to ask a follow-up question to that. So the better question would be, tell me about your day.
It was good.
And that leaves, you ask open-ended questions. That leaves room for them to come and fill in the gaps. And you continue asking those questions. And if they say, tell me about your day. My day was okay. Well, what did you do this morning? What about this afternoon? What about after school? And so then you can break it down into different pieces of the day and try and gain more information from them through those small probing questions that are open-ended.
And then for, folks in the beyond their teenage years, it probably could be a little bit more direct. Something wrong? Do we need to, are you doing all right? That's actually usually the question I ask. Is, you seem a little off. Are you doing all right? And sometimes they'll be like, no, I'm fine. And then you can just kind of tell, there might be something, but maybe not worth probing today. Maybe ask the next day. And, eventually I've learned over time that if there is something wrong and they feel that they can trust you, they'll open up.
Yeah, and seniors are actually a population that are victimized often.
Yes.
And for seniors, it's important to remember that these are people who have lived their lives, and for them to fall victim to cyberstalking or
identity theft.
Theft.
Yeah, there's a lot of different
there's
things.
this huge embarrassment that comes along with that because they're older and wiser and they should know better. But what they don't, trying to keep up with today's society and AI and all of the changes, it's a challenge. And so making sure you're checking in with your elders. Have you opened any new accounts lately? Have you gone shopping somewhere you don't normally go shopping?
Those are all very good, yeah.
Purchase any gift cards for anyone lately, because that's a way of victimizing elders.
Yes, and it's sad, but there's nothing. The onset of AI and the onset of global markets and things like that are definitely a way to get into these folks and really do it. Have you ever seen the movie The Beekeeper?
I have not.
It's an interesting movie. It's an action movie with Jason Statham. And the movie, it actually starts out, how he is in his movies. He's just an action star that goes and blows a bunch of stuff up. But the way the movie starts out is there was an elderly person that was taking care of him, giving him a place to live and things like that post his military career. And she commits suicide. Because a hacker group went in and basically convinced her that there was something wrong with her computer, and then allowed them to get into the accounts and took all of her money. So it's a movie, obviously, but it's based off of things that are actually happening that are out there, and I don't want to get super crazy on this, but based on everything that we're seeing, this is only going to get worse.
Yeah.
It's going to get worse before it gets better. And that really comes down to AI and what AI is capable of doing that's out there. The deep fakes, they've been around for a while, but now you can make a deep fake essentially in a couple of seconds. You can mask people's voices. You can do all kinds of different things that are out there. AI can go through your social media, and this is why I want to segue into this a little bit, into social media safety and those types of things here in just a second. But you can take AI, use social media, and then create a complete user profile of a person that they know everything about. They're so elderly, or our kids, it doesn't matter, and then be able to exploit them based off of patterns that we as humans may not necessarily see. And then from there, they can automate it. We talked about this, during our call a couple of weeks ago. It's going to get to a point now, and this is why it's so important to kind of bring this up. It's going to get to a point where AI is going to automate attacks in a way that we have never seen before. And the only thing that we're going to be able to do to really combat it is raise awareness, have people be able to think for themselves outside of what they're seeing on social media and those types of things. So with that, I want to kind of segue a little bit into maybe some social media safety topics, where we know AI is here. We know it's not going away. It's growing on an unprecedented scale. It's the biggest revolution in the history of mankind. And there are things that people can do to kind of prevent some of this stuff from happening, or at least lessen it. So I want to ask you a couple of questions on social media safety. Like, what do you recommend for people? Because we talked a lot about the victim side, but how do we prevent some of this stuff from happening? Because an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, I think is the way it goes. Mm-hmm. So maybe we'll look at that side. So what do you recommend for maybe some social media tips to prevent cyberstalking?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And going back to when identity theft first came out, right? Checking things. When identity theft first became a thing, people would go to their bank accounts or their credit cards and they would check their accounts and make sure that nothing suspicious is happening. So you do the same thing in the social media model. So if you have social media accounts, go on your accounts. Look at who your friends are. How do you have your settings set for people that want to be your friends on social media? Are you allowing friends and friends, or are you allowing just friends to view your profile? Knowing who you're allowing is key, because if you don't know who's looking at your social media and able to access it, you're opening yourself up to potential cyber concerns. And so that would be one step, is just looking at those things, making sure you do the steps that you're told to do. I think many of us are told, make sure you have a secure login, make sure you change your passwords often, and doing all of these things, but we're human and we don't always follow the advice that we're given. So following that advice is really important.
So I think even going through social media, there are people out there like take Facebook, for example. And then I'm not like agnostic. It doesn't matter what social media platform, but Facebook's a pretty good one because it's been around for a while. There are people out there with 4,500 friends, so to speak, that are out there. And there are people out there that go through and they post things about their kids, pictures, these types of things, and put their entire lives on social media. In your opinion, are these people prime targets to possibly be victims of, or future victims of cyberstalking?
So the more information you put out there, the easier it is for individuals to have access to who you are and what you do on a day-to-day basis, and the more likely it is for you to become a victim of identity theft or fraud or cyberstalking or misuse of this from AI. And so being aware of, when you take photographs, is there a picture behind you that's easily identifiable? You can see clearly, oh, I'm in Washington, D.C. I see the Capitol behind me. Or are you, at a lake that's frequented? Anything that identifies specifically where you live is another resource for individuals to use against you. So it's very important to make sure that if you don't want people to know all about you and be able to use that information about you, be thoughtful on who you're sharing that information with, at least.
Well, we also don't want to walk on eggshells all the time. I think that there's always a balance to be had when it comes to those types of things. their social media has built a culture where people thrive on likes. I can't count how many times somebody was like, well, I don't know what I did wrong. I only got 12 likes on this thing that I put on there. And I'm like, maybe you didn't do anything wrong. Maybe people are busy today. Maybe people don't like it because they are jealous. Like you can't put you can't put your mind in somebody else's mind. You can only assume what they're thinking, and I find that to be futile in a lot of different ways when it's all said and done. But for the folks out there that have kids and things like that, and I wanted to go into what you mentioned about AI. AI is really good at pattern recognition. People don't realize this, but AI has been around for a long time. It's not new. ChatGPT is relatively new, but the idea behind ChatGPT is not new. It's been around for a little bit. But pattern recognition is what it does. So you can go on Google Maps because Google has spent 20 years driving around with those little cars, all right, that are taking pictures of things. And all of that data is available to AI. And all you have to do, and people have done this, right? You can go on YouTube and you can look at people that are using ChatGPT 5, for example, and say they take a picture of something that they took on their phone, upload it into ChatGPT and say, where am I? And it will go through the Google database. It will go through the Apple Maps database. It will go through all of this stuff that's out there and find a random tree and a random road with no sign and pinpoint exactly within 10 feet of where they are.
That's incredible.
It's incredible and absolutely
Scary.
Terrifying, right, in certain aspects. But I wanted to kind of shed some light on what you were talking about when people put all these pictures on social media about their lives. It really does open them up to be able to do that. All it takes is, AI to cross-correlate a satellite with one of these other pictures. And we got satellites for days that are taking pictures of us from the top down. You've got Maxar Technologies, which you can just go in and rent satellite time. So there's things out there that you can use as resources to do all of this stuff. So the more information that you put out there, it's all about safeguarding who you are. We talked a little bit about some of the settings that you can do, but I think once again it comes down to you can have every setting in the world turned on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever platform that you choose to use, but it comes down to you being aware of what it is that you're putting out there for the world to see. And once you put it out there, you can't get it back. There's nothing that you can do to get that back. It's done. So when it comes to being preventative from a cyber stalking perspective and, working in cyber, my biggest recommendation from my perspective is always just be aware of what it is that you're putting out there. People are like let's take, for example, a social security number. Somebody calls up your phone and says, hey, give me your social security number. You're like, no, I'm not going to give you my social security number. But the crazy part about it is there's enough information out there about you that you don't even need to do that, which is crazy. You don't even need your social security number to apply for credit cards really anymore. You can go to, I think, Klarna or Affirm or something like that, and they do it with your address, they do it with your birthday, and they do it with your phone number, and they find out who you are. And then from there, they can backtrack into your credit to be able to do that. What stops an attacker from doing this kind of stuff? So ultimately, it comes down to whatever you decide that you want to put out, assume that it's public. Assume that anything that you put on the internet is available to everyone at all times. So when you go out there and you start posting and you start doing these things on social media, set your settings up to be as private as possible. Keep your network small. Like, you can still post about places you've been or things that you're doing, but don't post about where you're going. Post about what you did. Like something simple like that. Mm-hmm. All right, is a different mindset. You're like, I see these posts out there like, I'm going to LA at this time. Oh, I'm checking in on my flight. Oh, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And like, I know you're not supposed to be afraid, but you should also be aware. There's nothing that says that you can't say, oh, I just got to LA. Like, that didn't give you away your plan, didn't tell them what time you were leaving, didn't tell them exactly where you are, didn't tell them that you're sitting at LAX, didn't tell them anything. Just told them, hey, now you're here.
Exactly.
So,
That's really important information, I think, to have, because I think especially the older adults, right? The elderly, they're so used to trusting individuals. You tell them, a respected person calls them on the phone, and they're going to give them the information that they ask for, because they're going to believe, hey, this is your bank calling you. We'd like to, you won $1,000. We'd like to give you the information, but first we need your bank account information. Oh, really? Okay. And they give them their information just because they trust what's being told to them on the other side. So that, and being aware of what you're putting out there. I think it's harder for kiddos, and it's harder to educate kiddos on exactly on what to put out there and what not to put out there. Kids are invincible. Nothing will ever happen to them in their mind, but we know that's not true because we've lived it. So educating them, doing more in schools to educate kiddos about cybersecurity and how to be safe, because they're really the next generation that's going to be victimized if moving forward. So keeping them safe will ultimately help keep our future generations safe.
All right, so we've covered a lot in the last hour, going through all of the different things that are out there. But I want to circle back real quick after kind of going through this discussion and having the people listen to what might be out there. So now that they have maybe their eyes opened a little bit to a different way of thinking, at least we hope so. We've talked a little bit about prevention. I want to actually mention one more thing on prevention. When it comes to impersonation and stuff like that, I personally go old school. We have a code word. So this works for kids. It works for everybody that's out there. Have a code word as to whether or not you want to believe someone is who they say they are. Think about it. I don't know if you ever use Vivint or ADT or something like that. These things, in order to be able to do something, there's a code word that they have on file that actually authenticates who you are. It's like a password. Don't share that code word with anybody outside of the 3 or 4 people that are out there, and have nothing to do with anything that you have in your lives. So if you wanted to, think of a word like ivation. I say that because it's on a clock in the room here. So no one's going to picture ivation being part of your repertoire of words that you're going to use that are out there. But have a code word to go and authenticate who you are if people are calling you and asking you for money, if people are calling you and trying to extort you and say that they are someone who they say they're not, or vice versa. If you find yourself in a precarious situation, even from cyber stalking or something like that, or use somebody else's cell phone, that's happened before. You get a random phone number. Hey, my code is, hey, this is Dan. I'm calling you from another phone, and you'd be like, oh, hey, what's the word? And be like, ivation. Okay. Right now I know who you are. It's kind of weird, right? It's but that's where we are nowadays.
But that's where yeah, and where we've always, I think when I started my career, that was something that we would go out and present to community members. And we would always talk about giving a code word. And that was either to alert someone that something was going on and you needed help, or, as you said, to identify yourself through that word to someone that you care about.
All right. Final thoughts on, after having all this discussion on victims, and if something happens to them, who should they go to? Who should they call? Those types of things. I mean, we talked about law enforcement. We talked about a friend. We talked about not being, not necessarily preserving the chain of evidence, if possible. Any additions after our conversation that you might want to add?
I can't stress enough how important it is to document through law enforcement. Okay. And I know that in most cases, people are embarrassed or they don't want to feel like they're a victim. But I think to get the power back in their court versus the perpetrators, give it to law enforcement. They're the experts. They understand what crime is, what crime isn't. They can help you navigate better. And they've seen a lot.
I've seen a lot.
So there's really no need to have that feeling of embarrassment that you fell prey to this crime or became victimized. You shouldn't feel like you're to blame for anything. There are people out there and technology now that really supersedes who we are and what we do on a day-to-day basis. And so everyone at some point is going to be victimized. And just understanding law enforcement sees it, they recognize it, and they've seen it all. So pretty much anything you tell them is not going to shock them.
Well, that's good to know, and also not good in certain aspects. All right, well, I wanted to thank you for your time. I'm glad, you invited me too to have this, so thank you for the invite.
Yes, thank you.
To be able to come out here and have this conversation with you on cybersecurity, cyber stalking. It's not exactly a lighthearted topic by any means, but it's also a very necessary topic that people need to be aware of out there. And I just hope that the more awareness that we can generate, the safer we'll all become until the next challenge.
Thank you for inviting me as well. And we'll be connecting again soon, I hope.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this vital conversation. We're deeply grateful to Daniel Morrison and the Morevolved team for bringing their insight, urgency, and commitment to ethical tech into this space. Stalking is evolving, and so must our response. Whether it's AI-powered surveillance, predictive tracking, or digital coercion, survivors and families deserve protections that match the pace of technology. This episode is a reminder: safety isn't a luxury, it's a right, and accountability must be built into every system we create. If you or someone you love is navigating tech-enabled stalking, know that you are not alone. Visit victimjusticeunveiled.com and morevolved.com for survivor-centered resources, advocacy tools, and ways to take action.